Today, it is my distinct honor to welcome back to the show our Secretary of State and candidate for governor, Brian Kemp. Welcome back to the show, Brian. Now you're running for governor, and I know you're proposing plans to empower small businesses, reform state government, strengthen rural government, which I know is important to you. You've also have bold initiatives for immigration and crime. And you certainly are innovative as a small business owner. You certainly know the issues and the feelings and problems and challenges facing small business. How is that going to help you as governor?
Well, I think really what I've learned being Secretary of State, I've had the great opportunity to work with all 159 counties. I've been to every one of them. I've been to almost every elections office in every county in the state. And when I've done those trips, I've also taking the time to meet with Chamber of Commerce leaders, community leaders, elected officials, development authority people in the private sector, visited, different businesses in those areas to really figure out what's going on, where the rubber meets the road. And I've also had private sector experience. Obviously, being in Athens, the majority of the private sector stuff I've done is there. But I've also done a good bit of stuff in other places around the state. I was involved in rural manufacturing in Turner County, which is one of the poorest counties in the state, and been involved in a couple of different agriculture-related businesses that have been in rural Georgia. So I have a good understanding of that, and that's really the experience I'll take, and it's what I've seen out there on the road that for us, especially when I speak for people in the metro area where, I obviously live in Athens, but I'm here a lot. I have a place here. I spend the night, and I deal with all the issues we're dealing with in Atlanta. Great economy, tough traffic sometimes, but in some ways that's a good problem to have because we're busy. If things weren't going so good, the traffic wouldn't be so bad, but we wouldn't have as much money in our pocket. So I think we got to keep that environment going, tackle the tough issues we have like infrastructure and transportation, and really think outside the box, use innovation like I've done in the Secretary of State's office when it comes to transportation. Certainly not opposed to, roads, bridges, tackling congested areas, but we also got to think about autonomous vehicles, dedicated lanes, rapid bus transit, expanding rail if it makes sense to the local communities, and those local folks are wanting to pay for that. I certainly don't have an issue with the state partnering in that, but I think that's something that, the state in the last couple of years has done a good job of moving the needle on that, and you're seeing some action now. But a lot of that stuff takes a very, very long time. So I think we got to think about alternative things like expanding our ports where we can get truck traffic out of the metro area, the inland ports rather, get those containers on rail. And then outside of those type things, really around the rest of the state, small businesses are still hurting out there in these outlying areas, whether they're in rural Georgia or not. And it's time that we have a governor that will build off of really what Governor Deal has done to make Georgia number one for business in the country 5 years in a row and make us number one for small business and really help those small business people, and not only them, but all those working Georgians out there that are working for a small business person, whether they're construction people, whether they're, working in trade industries, and those folks are experiencing their health increase, costs go up if they can afford it at all. Their wages are stagnant. And in many of these areas, there is no economic growth. In fact, it's declining. Populations are declining. And we're really losing parts of our state. So we've got to focus on that. And that growth, if we're growing all over the state, and I'm not saying we're going to grow in every county out there, but if we can do some things to move the needle in different parts of the state, and there's great assets to do that with, because I know from private sector experience, and I've also seen it because I've been there, and if we have a plan like I do to strengthen rural Georgia and move the needle there with agriculture, manufacturing, and other technology, like making sure we have high-speed internet everywhere so we can have an educated workforce, a good quality of life, access to health care, even if it's through virtual medicine. Those are the things that I want to do as governor, and it's why it's a main point of my plan. Fundamentally, reforming state government so we budget conservatively, reduce taxes on everybody, implement a spending cap, and then we take a chainsaw to government regulations to get government out of the way to free up the private marketplace and let it thrive, not only here in Atlanta but in other places around the state. But we've also got to strengthen rural Georgia, like I said, but we got to keep our families safe, and that is an issue that is important to me. And another main part of my platform is keeping our families safe and putting Georgians first. And it's as good as the economy is. A lot of people don't like talking about that, just like they didn't talk about sex trafficking and the opioid epidemic 10 years ago, and now everybody's talking about it, and there's been a lot of focus put on it, and still big problems, but there's people working on it. Not so much in the world of, when you have federal prosecutors that have recently been appointed by President Trump that are saying Georgia is a distribution hub for the Mexican drug cartel. We have gangs like MS-13, literally tens and tens of thousands of gang members around our state that every day are distributing these drugs that the cartels are bringing in. They are doing carjacking. They are shooting our kids. And I'm not talking about 17 and 18-year-olds. I'm talking about 14 and 15-year-olds. I mean, when we have high school teachers that are being indicted for a gang-related murder of 3 people, that is a problem we need to take care of. When we have people that are buying gas in Atlanta that are getting jerked out of their car because of gang-related activities, we need to act on that. And I have a plan. I've been working with state law enforcement and local prosecutors on 2 different plans. One of them is to track and immediately deport criminal illegals that are here that are doing all of this. And number 2 is a plan to stop and dismantle gangs, to really go after street gangs in our state. And I worked with Cobb County District Attorney Vic Reynolds on putting that plan together, because Vic has done a good job of going after them in Cobb, and he's basically run them out to the outlying counties. Well, what I want to do as governor is I want to run them from the outlying counties to other states, and then they'll tackle the problem. And, there's a huge gang problem in Savannah, and they have been focusing on that. And the DA down there, another supporter of mine, Meg Heap, has a gang task force. So she's going after them, and they're starting to move the needle on a huge problem that they had in Savannah, Chatham County area that was really hurting their tourism industry and giving them a bad reputation. But the problem is, if you get outside of big places like Savannah, Marietta, Atlanta, and you don't have drug task forces or people that are going after these folks in the rural areas, they just don't have the firepower or the people or the experience to do that. And that's not a knock on them. I'm just going to be a governor that's going to give them the tools and work with them to help, break this chain, tackle this problem, stop these drugs coming in the first place. Because once they get in the distribution network, it's very hard to stop it. I mean, it's very widespread, has a lot of tentacles, a lot of webs that are going out there. We got to stop it at the source, and that's what my 2 plans will do.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back after the break.